She died in a motel, her face barely recognizable from the headshots that once lit up Hollywood. A child star turned scandal magnet, and in the end, not even the tabloids came. How did a studio darling become a ghost in her own lifetime? Barbara Payton didn't fall from grace. She crashed through every floor on the way down. At first, she was a rising flame. Blonde, sultry, magnetic. Hollywood had her pegged as the next big thing, but her off-screen life burned faster than any script could catch. Caught in a violent love triangle between actors Tom Neal and Franchot Tone, Payton became tabloid fodder after Neal beat Tone into a coma over her. Studios backed away. Roles vanished. And Barbara spiraled. By the 1960s, she was living in a $1-a-night motel, surviving off booze and transactional relationships. She tried to claw her way back with a brutal autobiography titled, I Am Not Ashamed. But Hollywood wasn't listening. When she died in 1967, her liver and heart gave out at 39. Once groomed to be America's blonde bombshell, she died faceless in the city that promised her everything. The next star died surrounded by water, and no one noticed. James Murray was supposed to be the face of a generation. Instead, he drowned in silence. After his breakout performance in The Crowd, director King Vidor called him the next great star. But fame didn't suit Murray. He drank, argued, disappeared from sets. Roles stopped coming. Offers dried up. And when Vidor found him years later, homeless, disheveled, begging, he offered him a part in his next film. Murray refused. He couldn't bear to be seen as a charity case. Months later, his body was pulled from the Hudson River. No headlines, no funeral coverage, just a brief police note. Unknown man. Drowned. Some say it was suicide. Others blame the bottle. Either way, the man who once captured America's heartbreak on screen ended as just another forgotten face in the crowd. But what came next was even crueler. A starlet, whose only companion at the end was her dog. Marie Prevost was once Hollywood's bubbly sweetheart, until the studios mocked her into oblivion. She starred in silent classics, her charm as fizzy as champagne. But when talkies took over, so did brutal gossip. After gaining weight during a difficult divorce, the press turned vicious. Has-been, overweight, unemployable. The studios followed suit. Roles vanished. So did her savings. By the mid-1930s, she was living alone in a tiny apartment, battling alcoholism and starvation. When neighbors complained about a barking dog, police entered her home and found her lifeless body. She had died days earlier. Her little terrier had refused to leave her side. The headlines were cruel. Former starlet dies alone. The truth was worse. A woman who once danced across screens had starved in silence, discarded by an industry that once called her adorable. And the next icon? She once made millions, but died pouring drinks in a dusty dive bar. Veronica Lake's hair made her famous, but it couldn't hide what was unraveling underneath. During World War II, her peekaboo bang became a national obsession. She starred in This Gun for Hire and Sullivan's Travels, becoming a pin-up for soldiers and a queen of noir. But behind the smirk and the screen glamour, chaos brewed. She clashed with co-stars, earned a reputation for being difficult, and battled bipolar disorder before the term even existed. By the 1950s, the calls stopped. So did the money. In a twist too bleak for fiction, Veronica Lake, once a millionaire, was found bartending in a low-rent hotel, using her real name and pouring drinks for people who barely believed her story. She died in 1973 from hepatitis and kidney failure. Most headlines didn't even notice. The woman who once hypnotized a nation with a single glance disappeared like a ghost. But not all ghosts jump from memory. Some leap from the Hollywood sign. Peg Entwistle didn't just vanish from Hollywood. She threw herself off it. In 1932, she was a young actress with promise. Broadway credits, a role in 13 Women. But the film flopped. Her part was slashed, and the silence that followed was deafening. No new roles, no calls, just closed doors. One night, Peg hiked to the Hollywoodland sign. The beacon meant to guide dreamers. She climbed the letter H, and jumped. Her body was found the next morning, along with a suicide note tucked into her purse. A few days later, a letter arrived at her apartment, offering her a part in a new film. Ironically, about a woman who takes her own life. She was 24. Her name quickly became a footnote, an urban legend. Not remembered for her craft, but for the fall. And yet, the next tragedy proves you can be first at everything and still die utterly forgotten. Florence Lawrence invented movie stardom, and Hollywood let her die in total obscurity. Before her, actors weren't even credited on screen. But audiences loved her so fiercely, studios gave in. They used her name, her face, her image, and built the very idea of celebrity around her. She was the original poster girl, the biograph girl, the world's first screen idol. But fame came with no safety net. A string of injuries, bad investments, and ruthless studio politics left her penniless. Offers dried up. She sold cosmetics door to door. By the 1930s, no one remembered who she was. In 1938, she took poison in her modest Los Angeles home. There was no grand eulogy, no studio tribute, just a forgotten obituary and a headstone paid for years later by fans who rediscovered her too late. The next icon had millions, beauty, and power, but her battles were waged inside locked hospital walls. Frances Farmer didn't lose her mind. Hollywood tore it apart, piece by piece. She was magnetic on screen, defiant off it. In the 1930s, Farmer refused to play the studio game. No fake romances, no puff interviews. But rebellion had a cost. After public outbursts and a DUI arrest, she was institutionalized. What happened inside those hospital walls still sparks debate. Electroshock therapy, reports of beatings, rumors, never fully proven, of a forced lobotomy. Her spirit, once blazing, was reduced to shadows. Years later, she emerged, tried to reclaim her name. But Hollywood had moved on. She died of esophageal cancer in 1970, a recluse in Indianapolis. The films forgot her. The studios buried her. Only myth remained. A woman who screamed too loud for the system to stomach. But the next tragedy? He didn't fight the system. He was swallowed by silence and alcohol before he could even escape. John Gilbert had the face, the talent, the romance, and still, Hollywood erased him. He lit up the silent era with brooding charm, sharing electric chemistry with Greta Garbo in Flesh and the Devil. Off-screen, they were rumored lovers. On-screen, he was billed as the great lover. But when sound arrived, whispers began. His voice didn't match his looks. It wasn't true. His voice was fine, but MGM's studio boss, Louis B. Mayer, despised him and allegedly sabotaged his talkie debut with rushed production and poor scripts. Gilbert spiraled. The roles stopped. The liquor poured. He died at just 38 from a heart attack. Alone and bitter. A man once adored by millions. Discarded like a broken prop. Garbo never spoke publicly of him again. The next star, his genius was real, but it was buried in addiction, cult films, and a coffin lined with Dracula's cape. Bela Lugosi gave us Dracula, and it drained the life from him long after the cameras stopped. In 1931, his piercing stare and hypnotic voice redefined horror. But the role that made him immortal became a curse. He was typecast, rejected by studios for anything outside capes and coffins. Offers dried up. Medical issues from wartime injuries led to morphine. And then, addiction. By the 1940s, he was broke, forgotten, and desperate. He took whatever roles he could, even in the strange, low-budget films of Ed Wood. One of his last performances was in Plan 9 from Outer Space, stitched together from scraps and stand-ins after his death. Lugosi died alone in 1956. He was buried in his Dracula cape, as if he couldn't escape the role in life or death. But the next story isn't a performance. It's a real-life horror, and it ends in blood. Ramon Novaro survived Hollywood's closet, but not the rumor of money under his bed. Once hailed as a matinee idol and the heir to Valentino, Novaro captivated audiences in Ben-Hur with soulful eyes and quiet intensity. But behind the camera, he lived in fear. As a closeted gay man in a hostile era, his life was a careful performance of silence and survival. By the 1960s, the spotlight had faded. He lived alone in the Hollywood Hills, private and unassuming, until one night in 1968, when two brothers broke in, convinced he had thousands stashed away from his silent film days. They tortured him for hours. When they found no fortune, they left him dead, beaten and choked by his own possessions. The headlines came fast, then vanished. Novaro's beauty once filled theaters. His death barely filled a paragraph. They lit up the screen, only to fade in silence, not with a bang, but a slow erasure, forgotten by the town they helped build. If you're still here, maybe their stories mattered after all. So, stay with us, subscribe, and help keep their names burning just a little longer.